what do we have to look forward to? 2023, we've lost the House. Democrats have lost the House. But how do you keep the energy, electoral energy up when we might be moving into a presidential election in 2024 between Biden and Trump again?
There are some things we can control and some things we can't control. We have to build organizations on the ground that are in touch with people year round, that fight for their interests. And to the extent they get elected or they get people elected, they have to deliver for those interests. They have to deliver the goods, whether it's at the city level, the state level, or the federal level. And they have to be, when they're not in a position to deliver, they have to still be seen as integrated into those communities and as the biggest champions for those communities' rights and material interests. Yeah. We're not going to be able to do that on the scale of hundreds of millions because our organizations are not strong enough. But they are strong enough to do it on the scale of several million people in key states. And we have to do that. We also have to hope that the broader messaging about the danger of MAGA and the potential of a different kind of governing coalition resonates with enough people that we can hold off MAGA for another 2 or 4 years. The problem we have, and no one has an easy answer to this, if we don't build up the strength of the progressive current, the rooted progressive current, to a whole different level than it is now, we're going to be fighting one defensive election after the next. We'll be permanently in that place. And when you're fighting that way against fascists, all you have to do is lose once. All you have to do is lose once. And if the fascists are then in power, you're stuck for a generation. So
look at the Supreme Court. I feel like we're already stuck. I can't,
exactly. We need to have enough governing power to change the rules of the game. Maurice Mitchell, head of the Working Families Party, often says we need enough power in the rigged system to unrig it. We've got to have term limits on Supreme Court, or we've got to pack the Supreme Court. We've got to change the Electoral College. We have to get the Voting Rights Act back. All of that requires getting enough power within a rigged system to unrig it.
Why it becomes so deflating in many ways, too, is because when you look at Biden running, Biden said a lot of things as a candidate that were extremely appealing to people who are, very on the left. There were a lot of things that, I personally felt like, well, shit, if he does these, it's also what Trump did to get elected. Trump said a lot of things that were speaking to the failed policies of the system that he was kind of running against. But when Biden was saying it, there were all these things that you were sort of going, well, look, if he does 80% of this, he could be an extremely progressive candidate. Yeah. It's that you then watch it in action and you go, they, as they always do, they forget about what they promised.
Right. And he's a terrible figurehead. He's a terrible figurehead for the entire party. I'm sorry. Yes, there have been wins and victories. Yes, there have been some good stuff, but he's a terrible head of this party. He's just not, he's not good. And the ones who are, Bernie and someone like AOC or other members of the squad, they're like, you'll get your turn. It's like the understudy's better than the main actor, right? And you're like, man, can we just get a moment? Can you use the progressives to their advantage? Because I guarantee you, if you give some members of the squad the opportunity, sure, there'll be online lefties who are like, they've sold out. But if you give them a role, AOC said it, she was like, why wasn't I deployed more in the midterms? If you wanted to win in certain counties, districts, deploy me. I'm down to travel. I'm down to rally. It's like, and they don't, right? So their best kept weapons, their best weapons are kept, whatever, under wraps on the bench. Exactly. Thanks for all the metaphors.
They're hostage to a certain way of looking at the world that doesn't correspond to the way the world is now. But the only way to beat them, the only way to do that, we have to look at Bernie had the right strategy, but it ideologically appealing, which is his whole campaign in 2016 and 2020 was, we have to motivate those voters who've been neglected by both parties, who have an interest in fighting the system, and we have to get them to turn out and vote and make the political revolution. I think Bernie has some weaknesses on how he deals with race and gender, but as far as that goes, he had the right idea.
Yeah.
The fundamental reason that Bernie did not win in 2016 or 2020 was not that there was a conspiracy on the part of the centrists to keep him out. Of course they wanted to keep him out. That's a given. The reason is the infrastructure underneath him was not strong enough in those communities to turn those people out. He came from one of the whitest states in the country. He had no track record on key issues in the Black community in the South, face to face with Jim Crow. They made the safe choice, what they thought was the safe choice. We can disagree with that. But until you have that infrastructure, until you're there year in and year out, until you visited the churches, until you have people on the ground, it's very difficult. We have a critique of the system that says it throws people away, it alienates people, it exploits people, it grinds them down. Everything about that is true. And then we seem to think some people on the left think if you show up one time with a good leaflet or a good internet vibe that says, hey, we're for you, we're against the system, somehow people are going to get behind you right away.
I mean, if you have a good podcast and it's live and you've got good guests, I mean,
that's just not serious politics. And Bernie wasn't that simplistic, but it hadn't been built enough. That's not Bernie's fault.
You have to also beat the refs. I mean, to stick with a sports analogy, you have to be able to overcome the refs. That is how, and I think that is, and to what you're saying, I think is so true. It's just so frustrating when it feels, like you're stuck in one of the things I found so appealing about AOC was she was like, you need to be willing to not get reelected. And then it feels a lot of times like that has not necessarily been, what they're not, going for it all the time. It has become a bit more of a long strategy. And if you were maybe brought into that a little bit more, again, if you felt like you had a cell in the Democratic Party a little bit more, a unit that really did try to hold things hostage, that would probably really get more people believing in that there is something to vote for, because Bernie was able to motivate a lot of non-voters.
Right.
And
it's a line, because you can't alienate a victory, right? And throw away something that might be successful, like voting no.
Right.
If I don't think AOC would have voted no on the omnibus if it didn't have a chance of passing. I just don't think she would have done that. It was a safe no vote. So it's always that strategy. I love the way Max. It is a strategery. And Max, everybody, you can tell why he's my mentor. You can tell why that you should definitely buy the book Power Concedes Nothing, and you should buy his Revolution in the Air book. But it's because he's always like comes on is like, oh, I'm sorry, are you brand new to this decades-long struggle? and it always speaks to me as someone much younger, but who was politicized before the Obama moment, and sort of I've been seeing a lot of Obama, not to call you out, Gareth, but you just said, I think the Obama energy has been probably one of the biggest letdowns in our lifetime, of feeling like he didn't actually deliver on a lot of things, but I knew he wouldn't, you know what I'm saying? So, but I like that we can't afford to act brand new to this struggle. We have to get over our feelings about the sellouts and about the long road and about the work. And we have to kind of buckle in. And because we don't have time, as I think we've pointed out before.
I know we're trying to wrap up, but let me make one hopeful comment here.
Please.
We were very lucky to have a Bernie Sanders. I mean, who carried the ball for the progressives in 2016 was an old white guy from one of the whitest states in the country who had managed, because of that,
He's a Jew,
to have a perch in U.S. politics and have enough legitimacy and keep his politics to go out there and campaign in 2016. Yeah. One of the fruits of that turn, indirectly, if you look at the squad, the racial and gender composition, and where those folks come from and the communities that they're rooted in, is much more the base that has to turn out to make change in the United States than where Bernie came from. Not to take anything away from Bernie, that's where he was. I'm, very grateful for him. So I agree very much with what you're saying, Gareth, about a cell within. I might not use the word cell, but a cohort.
It's probably not the best term.
Yeah, but the cohort within the Democratic Party that is really developing a new generation of leadership, and that does have roots in the progressive movement. We're a lot further along on that now than we've been in a very, very long time. Very, very long time. There are some really talented people in electoral politics at different levels, in labor organizing at different levels, and in community power building, some of these state-based power building organizations that are covered in the Power Concedes Nothing book. That layer of people are in their 30s and their 40s. A few of the older ones might be in their early 50s. That's the age, right? That's the sweet spot right now for what's going to be the next generation of political leaders. And if we can stave off the threat from MAGA, I think there are really good prospects. Some of those folks are going to be exactly what you're talking about in terms of being able to play the kind of roles that we need if we're going to move this country in another direction.
I mean, we got to wrap, but I also have to say, I think we're running out of runway comment that Gareth, you made, and I think people are pointing out, and, critiques of incrementalism. It means more street movements. I mean, it does. It means more Occupy Wall Street. It means more Black Lives Matter movements. And it means they're going to come harder and faster and be more, people are going to be conflicted about them. They're going to be militant. I hope they exist. And they're going to need our help. They're going to need our leadership. They're going to need our strategy. They're going to need, all of that. So ooh, baby, it's coming. You know what I mean? I think there will be more.
A general strike at some point, some version of something like that actually does show people that there is power in the hands of workers.
Yeah.
And again, they've made it so difficult to pull that off because everybody is living so paycheck to paycheck.
Sure. But look at the year 2022. It's the year of labor, right? Look at how much more popular it is to talk about labor rights than it was just a few years ago. So speaking of wanting to jump on a winning train, and why am I using an analogy? Because ironically, Congress voted to fuck over the railroad union, and workers, but they got hammered for it. I mean, this could have gone under the dark of night, but it became national conversation what happened to the railroad workers. And yes, it wasn't a victory, but the victory to me was the dialogue around it, and electeds knowing they are not that, we'll remember it. What's going on, Frantifa? If you haven't already, subscribe to this channel right now. Hit that button. And also, you can become a patron and support the show every single week. Get access to bonus episodes and exclusive merchandise. Patreon.com/Bitchuation Room. Do